I'm grounded.
You are grounded.
What did it come over 15
I've done it plenty of times. No one's ever said anything, so I didn't know either. I've signed at least 3 of them before.
You got that house done yet or
No one's ever
not?
said anything.
I need a couple more days.
I guess I've signed top.
Electricians.
Yeah, I've signed towels before, and I've signed nutties before. I've signed a few of them.
Come by there.
They're quite the old group. They're used to knobbing tube
Yeah,
wiring.
exactly. Yeah, you would think so.
Tells you how old they
Yeah,
are.
I think like 7 to 10 days. Yeah, because they didn't say anything last
Now,
time.
I'm gonna tell you something.
That's what I'm thinking.
If you stay for the next meeting, that guy right over there told me.
I went down and checked to make sure, and I could pull the
I
deed.
questioned him about the property over next to Steve Powell's house because apparently
Oh, that's his old
we made an
paperwork.
offer on that. They wanted a higher offer. Now the lady phoned back and told Brian to take that offer that the city offered him. But he said we need to protect that foundation and look at that before we take it out because that's a pretty new foundation underneath that model.
Hey, there's the menu on here.
Yeah. Guess we can look at it.
Different way to turn down a home.
I know.
Who is this anyway?
That's what he
They
said.
call it this right here.
We don't have to do what he said. I got to go to the school board meeting. The whole family farming. But he thinks it might be something that poor salvage.
Yeah, I don't know the answer to that. I got you.
I don't either. I figured I'd ask the
What's
builder.
that? What's his thing?
I just want to.
Should I ask your guys that work for you?
Well, I just,
These people, at least.
me in my opinion.
Somebody might want to put a different type of house on there. That's what I kind of think.
Putting a limit.
Really, I think you want to place.
Yeah, would it save you? Has that got a basement or a crawl space?
I have no idea. I was talking to Carl out here the other day after we left. I have no idea.
If it's just a crawl space, I'd say tear it out. If it's a basement,
If it's a block foundation, I just take it out.
forward.
Is it forward?
But I
Something to look at as you go through. If it's
Oh. Where my mother-in-law lives. Christina Carlton.
Chris?
Yeah, Chris.
Where right across from Tony.
23 Elm, I think. Yeah, kind of dash. She wanted to know if you could go into her house and look at this wall and tell her whether or not it was
He owns that
structural.
building too. Captain's Tavern. Yeah.
I'm gonna tell you something. He can look at walls and see if they're moving.
Oh.
Yes.
That changed a lot.
He called me about a month ago.
Am I right?
Getting here stuck. There's a crash. There he is. So, right there. I gotta go.
Hi, Bruce.
Don't you agree?
Good. How you doing?
Well, it didn't look too bad overall. I can see. That was one of my first things when I went through the whole thing.
Hey, we need these signs before you walk in.
By me?
Yep.
I didn't see any, did you?
You didn't read it. did you?
Yeah, I did. Did I read it
Tell
wrong?
me you wrote it.
I read through it. Where'd you see it at, Paul? Show me.
Ludlow Hill Park, U.S. Bank parking lot.
I guess this
Or they
really
put it
yes.
in words
I
that I
guess
didn't
2
read.
weeks ago. They told him moved or whatever. We are okay.
Is
Aaron here from
oh, I thought he was. I don't think so.
To exceed.
All right. Welcome, everybody. We'll
Increase.
call to order the work session for council, and we've invited redevelopment too. Got 2, 4 of the 5, right? I think we got one with a broken leg.
It's not broken, but it's not in good shape.
It's not in good shape? Okay. All right, could I get a roll call, please, Richard? All right, could I get a roll
Councilperson Tony Abbott.
Here.
Councilperson Aaron Cook.
Here.
Councilperson Mel Davis.
Here.
Councilperson Randy Abner.
Here.
Councilperson Paul Seymour Jr.
Here.
City Attorney Del Weldon.
Here.
Utility Director Olin Clausen is absent. Mayor Kelly Milan.
Here.
And myself.
Okay, and the primary purpose of the work session is to review the development agreement for the multi-unit project down here on West High Street. Y'all have had your agreement for a few days now, and hopefully you got some questions or need some clarifications.
Give them a copy.
Oh, sure. And we've got Darren Kittner from Flaherty Collins here to answer anything on their side of things, and we got Bruce Donaldson, who handled the agreement from our side. So I'm going to open it up for questions up here. You guys have anything? Yeah. Have anything? Oh, yes, sir. You got a delivery person. I got a delivery person.
There it is. And I got a hug.
Well, you got a hug with a delivery. That's all right. That's all right. That's all right. So, fire away, guys. Fire away, guys. Go ahead, Mr. Seymour. I know you've got a question or two.
I got a lot. I encourage anybody else to go first if they would, but I'll go right now if nobody else has anything.
I've got one question.
Yes, sir.
What about the levy? Has this all been worked out with Army Corps of Engineers?
This is the first step to be before we can even go to them.
Okay.
Yeah, that's in the process for sure, Tony. Yes.
I have a question, Your Honor.
Yes.
The utility contribution, is that included in the 15 million or included in the 15
No.
million?
No, it is not. No. And don't really have clarification on what all that is. Yeah, go ahead, Darren.
Darren Kittner, Flirting Collins. I'm going to be honest, I don't know what it is either, simply because it's not something we have had before. There's not many municipalities who have that investment opportunity. I think the way it was contemplated in this agreement is that's an investment that the utility is going to make in order to get a rate of return that they're allowed to, or rate of return, I think it's recoup it in a certain amount of time. As per their, as I understand it, state law or regulatory requirements. But that's something that we've not, that was going to be a next step to sit down with our construction team and just look at what's there, if any, that they can do. So I'll be honest, I don't know a lot about that world either.
Well, and what we've got in the agreement and what we've kind of put in terms of pen to paper is one of our meetings to discuss the development project. The utility director stated that they would contribute as much as they possibly can, and then also had some data reflecting how much they would recoup in terms of utility bills. What we decided to do, and we have that kind of information, plus we have just history in terms of projects like this where utilities essentially does a similar exercise based on how much it'll cost to run the utilities versus how much they'll get back. And so we separated it out in terms of what would be a traditional city obligation, which would be just to get the utilities to the property. And then, and Mel knows this, and then in terms of a capital expenditure, that's what we would go back and find out later. So what is the capital investment that the utility would make? And with big projects, sometimes those are comp, if you're going to get your money back, or sometimes the developer pays for it. What the data suggests and what the initial statements from the utility company suggests is that the return on those utility bills would justify comping the capital. So we already would pay to run the utilities to the property. It seems based on the expected return, then utilities would comp the capital expenditure, and then construction infrastructure beyond that would be responsibility of the development. So does that sound right, Mel?
Yeah.
Okay.
I think Olin could probably give you a better idea of that, which I think that's what you mean by your construction folks sitting down with. Yes.
Has Olin been involved at all yet? I mean, I know he's for the project, and I know he spoke on it before, but has he put any numbers on it yet?
Not that I'm aware of.
Yeah.
No.
And quite frankly, we haven't really. We've been focused on getting the development agreement done. As you know, there's soil issues, so kind of didn't want to get the cart before the horse and get into those deep discussions till we kind of had this kind of first hurdle ramped up. So at least on my side, I haven't had those discussions or kind of called together a group to really look at all that stuff.
Yeah. And I think what's important is just, if you think of three different ways utilities will be spent, one would be, again, what the city would normally provide, which is get utilities to the property. The third category is what would traditionally be part of the normal infrastructure, which we would be paid for in the development agreement. And then this middle ground of capital, if that's comped based on a rate of return, then 2 out of those 3 categories would not be part of the development agreement. Only the third would be using development funds.
Darren, I'm sorry you sat back down. I have another question. The other question I have, there was a section in here about the budget. Lawrenceburg would pay what they demanded beyond the design, the original design. Is that right? It's in section.
Talking about the part where it says if we have any demands that are outside of the original.
Yeah, I think what we have shared and show you that is somewhat, I say traditional, both in a typical for a project like this, as well as I think we've tried to gear this to a more traditional design, but kind of anything that is above and beyond what you would normally see, which, we've had cities before who said, hey, we want 100% masonry around the whole building. That wasn't in the numbers, and unfortunately, because I think you and I have both stretched to make this a reality, we don't have it in our. So I use that example, not that you would do that, or that's what you're thinking.
So if the city would demand a change order of some type.
Yeah. If the city said, hey, we want marble flooring throughout, or gold sinks, something like that, to be really crazy. That's the type of things that weren't contemplated in the design of both what I showed you on paper as well as showed you in person.
Yeah, okay.
So.
Well, I'll tell you how I went about this, because I'm the kind of guy that needs to read something 2 or 3 times to get it. When I read it the first time, the things that stood out and back that in my mind, and the first time I read it, I didn't have my highlighter. I find in there that the budget from time to time will need to be adjusted, increased. It's said in there numerous times. It makes that point. When I made my vote off 15 million.
Right.
Okay, now when I got to the back in the attachments, I noticed that we got 150 to 130 units. I made my vote according to 150 units. So what that did was it put me on, okay, let me focus a little bit more here. So I read back, went on a second time, and I've got questions. I don't like seeing from time to time, because my commitment to you is $15 million. That's how I feel.
That's all it would ever be.
Okay, but what does it mean? How do you explain to me then it's $15 million, but it also says behind it may need to be adjusted?
Well, I think that was with respect to the total budget, which is the risk we take on. I mean, I can't tell you for sure that it's going to come in at a certain number. I can tell you that if it comes in higher, your number stops at 15, and that's on us as developers. But I can't. If I can't lock in a number today that's going to be the budget, because
but we don't need to. And here's another point I want to make. When you guys took me to show me that building you had, you sold me. You absolutely sold me. I don't need to help you guys build this building. So the other thing I don't understand is there's some paragraphs in here about us. You I think, reporting to us, and maybe I should just go through here and read a few things, because I would feel better about voting for this if instead of my simple mind seeing the budget needs to be increased from time to time. It says Lawrenceburg. I don't need to see that if it doesn't mean it. I'd rather it be.
You want to?
Yeah, Bruce Donaldson, Barnes and Thornburg. A couple places. The definition of Lawrence financing funds on page 3, which is what is used throughout in terms of Lawrenceburg's obligations, specifically says it will not. Your part of it won't exceed 15 million. Unless increased pursuant to 404C. 404C was exactly what was just being asked about. Only if Lawrenceburg specifically says we want some kind of design alteration that's going to increase the cost of the project, then it could go over. But you see the $15 million number in both that definition and in 404C as a cap.
And guys, Bruce is our attorney. He's negotiated for us, and Darren obviously he has counsel as well. But I think what both of these guys will tell you, Paul, to answer your question, because it's a fair one, are we committed, locked into a hard cap of 15 million? And the mayor advocated for that because I know that's your vote, and these guys could both say that that is true. We have a hard cap, does not exceed 15 million. They're just saying that if we were to come to them and ask for additions to the project, we would have to pay for them, but we don't have to ever do that, and they can't do that without your permission. So the contract is consistent with your vote.
And one thing I want is, Paul, if you don't mind if I go back, the 130 versus 150 units is not a scaled down version of the project. It's if you think about it as the box, I mean, the site is the site, what fits on there, the box that fits on there is the box that fits in there. How that gets carved up in between, in that it's going to be somewhere between probably 140 and 150. Right now we're at 152. I think that we're probably going to end up losing a couple units here and there when you think about different columns that have to go through that you don't have, back in June when we were talking about the design hadn't advanced that far. We've also, gone to great lengths to stay off of the levee as much as we can and pull some things back. And because of that, that could cut into the units. So that 130, 150 was just something back in June when we first started this agreement. I do want to think, we've been negotiating this for 6 months. So the city has really pushed back on some things. I think we've pushed back. There's been a lot of give and take over the months. But when we first started, it was, hey, until I really get in there, I don't know. I would assume 130 is a really safe number. So let's put it. My expectation is we'll be pretty close to 150, as I've always said. But we've not reduced the scale or scope of the project. It's just once you get that box that you've seen, how that gets cut up internally is what will decide the number of units. But the size of the building is the same, if that makes any sense.
Yeah, it does make sense to me, but 150 units gets me 300 people downtown walking and spending their and after all, this is what this is all about.
Right.
And 130 units only gets me.
Not necessarily, because if the 130 has more 2 bedrooms than the 150 had, you probably are going to get more residents per room. I mean, the math, I'm not saying it gets you exactly the same. It could get you more theoretically. It could get you less as well. I acknowledge that. But that's not necessarily true unless you dive in to see what the makeup of those 150 units are versus the 130. So, like I said, the building's not any smaller than what you've seen before unless it's been pulled back off the levee or so. But we are maximizing this site to the fullest. It's just how it ends up getting cut up once the architects get involved. Like I said, I'm pretty sure it's 150. That was just a number that, without knowing, and again, it's not going to be exactly 150. It's going to be somewhere between 145 and probably 155, quite frankly. But that was a safe number to ensure that we get Army Corps feedback and, we find out there's this in the ground and you really can't build on top of that part of it, and you got to finagle the building to know, hey, I didn't want to ever drop below a number that I felt I could deliver. So that number has not changed since June. That was just a safe number without us knowing what's out there that we had to commit to at that time. And I'd be fine taking a minimum number out. I think that was something that the city, had in that first draft, and we tried to come up with a safe number. But I don't think legally there needs to be a minimum number or maximum. I can tell you, we're building out the site to the gills. That's the right word.
I'm just going to if you don't care, if we're here to talk, and I know we're limited, so I'm gonna flip pages here.
How's that answer on that, though? I mean,
We're doing some good negotiating. He's already taken that 130 number out of there from where he That makes me happy.
We could save
And
6
he
months
told me
worth of
we
work.
He told me we wouldn't be spending no more than 150, but I don't read it like that. But don't forget, you're writing this contract, so 5 of us will vote on it. I don't want to be confused when I sign something. So this from time to time bugs me.
It's probably confusing, quite frankly, to protect you. I mean,
As long as our number stays capped, unless we demand something silly, then I'm fine with that. But I have a question, and it might be unfair to you, Darren.
okay.
You're not a geologist, you're an attorney.
Mel, can you speak up?
Have you
Yes.
picked up any borings that might cause some issues? Picked up any numbers or seen those?
Don't have numbers. I just know that it's significant issues, but we'll sort through it and deal with it.
Okay.
But probably to be about as significant issues as we've seen, quite frankly, in our experiences.
All right.
So
This is Lawrenceburg.
So in other words, you're taking a piece of property that you know has significant issues, and you're willing to take any of the cost overruns over the $15 million on that issue too?
That's our plan. To be full honest, there would be a point where it would make no sense for us to do that, right? But I think we've looked at it, and we've had the geotech study done, worked with our architects and structural engineers, and we're reaching out to a new one to look at all kinds of different ways to be able to construct in and around it. I mean, quite frankly, the entire site, in some places, just getting a couple feet deep, you hit it. And so we're also concerned, a lot of times kind of your fallback is remove all the dirt, bring new in. We think that probably isn't what the Army Corps would want to see with respect to the levee. So that's why, again, it's a less than ideal issue. And quite frankly, I went to the mayor and said, Mayor, I don't know how this plays out. I'd like that $15 million, this to be kind of outside of that $15 million cap in case it gets too crazy. And Mayor, I don't know if it's to his credit or from my standpoint to his to our detriment, said no, we can't do that. So I said, well, we're going to give it do our best to try to make the project happen with that falling kind of within the budget, just the general budget we've all agreed upon and splitting. But to be honest, I don't expect it to happen. But there come, if it's $5 million, I say, look, this just doesn't make sense. We can't do it.
I know you had to do some significant undercutting in Covington. It looked to me like.
Yeah, well, Covington, we just removed a lot of there. We were probably 3 blocks from the levee, so we were able to haul it all out. What we had there was the flood last February.
Yeah.
The water table rose, and it was quicksand for 4 months.
Right.
I mean, and there we spent a significant amount of money, which I think we say you get with us if something like that happens, we have shown we can and will deal with it. Just so there is a point where, especially knowing it early on, it wouldn't make sense to deal with it.
Okay.
Financial sense, I should say.
Okay. Page 2. Explain to me conveyance tax documents.
Bruce, you want this? I have it here too.
$702C.
Yeah, Dell, you might want to address. I think this is just the real estate transfer documents, isn't it?
Where you at?
2C.
Lawrenceburg shall execute and deliver all forms, affidavits, certificates required to be filed. 702C.
Yeah, look at yours. Right. It's numbered differently.
Page 12.
I just don't understand this one.
I think it's all done at closing, Paul. It's just a conveyance of the tax.
Well,
Tax document.
the only reason
Yeah.
why I'm asking is because we've kind of got an estimation, and does it have anything to do with the?
No.
Okay.
No, nothing to do with the $300,000 minimum.
And I just didn't
okay.
understand the meaning of it. That's all.
Okay.
I just wanted
No,
that explained.
That's a good question, and so all of that, the entire article just covers the conveyances required for the closing. So there are some steps that we have to take to transfer the property over.
All about property transfer.
Exactly. So we'll do all that at the closing and just the normal obligations that someone would have at a closing. Some of those don't apply to us. It's not a commercial transference, but whatever's required, we're obligated to make that happen. Both sides are.
Paul, if you look at page 3,
Yeah.
on the bottom there, taxpayer agreement,
Yep.
that's,
See that.
that's the one that identifies the $300,000 minimum.
All right. Now, I've got I looked up the forgivable loan meaning of what that is. So instead of you guys calling this a grant, I think the reason why you're calling it a forgivable loan is because you can put some terms on it.
Mm-hmm.
Is that?
It's favorable for a bunch of different reasons, and it helps both sides. So it helps the developer in the sense of just how they can take on funds and how they're taxed on funds. What we don't want is, any additional costs. So it helps us and it helps them. And the way that we do that is through the agreement and through this joint collaboration with redevelopment, economic development, and City Council Board of Works.
Then I see a fulfillment date is substantially completed. To me, I always refer back to if we got a time period on that, or is it like certificate of occupancy? To me, that's when we're done. So
Yeah, what do we contemplate as far as substantial completion, guys?
okay,
How do you usually do that, Bruce? Or Darren, rather?
Well, yeah, I think it's when you get your certificate of occupancy. If you
Okay.
ask for a specific date, and I can take a chance to look. I don't think we have it in here. If we do, we put it out there just because we don't know how long the Army Corps process is going to take. So generally, I would say if we didn't have that, we're 6 months from getting a shovel on the ground, and then 18 months from the first phase opening, and no more than 24 months before it's done. So 30 months, we're done. That's a wild card here that I think we try not to pin it either side down because we just don't know how it's going to go.
And you would agree, Darren, you would agree with Paul that it's CO would be the substantial completion, not some other benchmark. It is certificate of occupancy.
To me, you could do it technically when you have first residents move in. I've seen it both ways, and if you have a again, it depends what you're trying to accomplish with it, but I think you usually want to pinpoint it to something objective if you can, like a clear, delineated occurrence that.
Okay. No, that makes sense.
all right. Now, while you're there, you might just stand.
I didn't know if it was me or Bruce.
Explain the terms guarantor and guarantee.
So the guarantor will be a Flaherty and Collins entity or individual who guarantees both the completion of the project, that once we start, there'll be an entity that has assets that guarantees that it gets completed on your behalf, as well as an entity that is guaranteeing the $300,000 payment. So it's not just, yeah, we'll pay you $300,000, it's left at that. Your team wanted someone with teeth backing that up so that they could go after them if need be.
And how about the guarantee?
I think you're the guarantee.
Yeah.
The recipient of that guarantee.
The city's a recipient of that.
Now, there's one thing I'd like to mention. We see Lawrenceburg approvals, redevelopment commission, and Lawrenceburg Economic Development Commission. I think council was the only one that got this, but redevelopment has their name all over it and was going to sign it on the back. And they didn't get a copy, I don't think. Tonight they got it. I think they should have had a copy. So that's why I'm asking this.
Well, what we tried to do was, and you might be correct, but what we tried to do was keep the amount of these copies as a minimum as we could. Okay? Because we certainly didn't want people out in the community thinking, you know, before, this is just a draft copy, right? It's not been approved. As far as redevelopment's piece of it, it's the land, right? I mean, they're going to be conveying the land over to the city, which has already been voted on and agreed upon. So that, for lesser words, I guess that's the reason.
Well, and here's something else in this paragraph. I don't know how it would go in. That's for you guys to figure out. But we're talking on page 3. We're talking about Lawrenceburg approvals, and we all know we have to have approvals from the Corps of Engineers and the LCD.
Yes.
But I don't know that.
I agree with Paul. I wanted that in there, and they took it out because
we didn't want to be held responsible for paying any additional funds up. Say they walk away from the project. Either party walks away from the project,
right,
because they found out that this couldn't be done, this couldn't be done, or whatever. We didn't want to hang our hat on we can't control Army Corps. What we do have, and not that we have control, but what we think we can do is, okay, we're going to have to go to the Conservancy and present this along with the rendering, get their blessing, things like that. We got to also get an easement released by the Historical Society, okay, which I've been in contact with them, going to their meetings, keeping them updated on what's going on as well. Those are the kinds of things we felt like we had some control of making sure it got done. So where those were listed, but Army Corps, they're the wild card.
We don't have
control, so we didn't want to put that burden on the city. And, you know, say the Army Corps says, we're not going to approve this, we're not going to approve that, unless you do this and this, and it's going to be a $3 million ad. And they say, well, we're just not going to be able to do the project. So we didn't want to be responsible for any payments of that, you know, going forward.
Well, and that later on in my conversation, I mean, I don't like being responsible. I mean, it mentions pre-development fees and things like that. I don't like that. I mean, I'm all for the project, but if it doesn't happen, is it anybody's fault?
Well, and that's a shared cost.
We got money in this too.
Yeah, and it would be a shared cost. If it's nobody's fault, I think that's the way it's written. Correct me if I'm wrong, Bruce, whatever. Is if it's nobody's fault. If it's not the developer's fault nor the city's fault, then it's a shared responsibility.
Yeah, and we actually negotiated this part of it at great length because there are going to be some development costs, and like we've talked about already, you know, with the geotech issues and with really anything. I mean, anything could come up that could lead the project to fail, and we hope that doesn't happen. We don't think that would happen. So, but what do you do to protect yourself? So we have to clearly define what causes are we responsible for and what causes are they responsible for, and then what causes is no one responsible for. And so that kind of goes back, Paul, to your question about, you know, why isn't redevelopment, you know, why don't they have to vote on this, or why didn't they get copies of the agreement? Well, we negotiated fairly that, okay, this is a city council project, but we're responsible for our redevelopment commission, our planning and zoning, our internal engineering, our clerk treasurer. We even are taking responsibility for the historic aspects of this. So all of the things that are really in our control. If the project fails for any of those reasons, then we would be considered as responsible for that, and we would have to pay the costs that were incurred up to that point in terms of engineering and the work that's done. If the project fails for anything that Flaherty and Collins does, then they have to pay 100% of those. And then if the project fails for something that the Army Corps or LCD does, or an act of nature, just an act of God, then we split them. So going into this, we have to clearly define who's responsible for what, and writing it that way protects us.
Yeah, and Paul, for what it's worth, it's common for us to have these in our agreements because, for what it's worth on this deal, we're over 100,000 that we've already been out of pocket, and we haven't really gotten to designing the building. We're just trying to figure out what's in the ground, get documents negotiated, and when that happens, then those monies ramp up pretty quickly. So the idea was, how do we kind of get this thing moving a little bit? So, we were going to be concerned if the city didn't have comfort level that it could get that the redevelopment commission would approve this, that planning and zoning would entitle it. So that's why we wanted to see some sort of comfort from the city that those approvals at least we could feel good about, and we could start incurring those costs. If the city said, no, we can't commit to that, then we'd probably say, all right, we're just going to sit on the sidelines for a while until those approvals can happen, in which case, especially with the Army Corps hurdle here, would have really set this project back a ways. So that's why it's in here.
I mean, the way I've seen this project all along, you guys know what you're doing.
We hope so, yeah.
We don't. We're very, very bad at this.
And that's why it's purely limited to the approvals.
All I want to do is give you $15 million and you build a building.
Yeah.
That's my whole idea here. I don't want any of this because historically we mess things up. They get done, but at a cost that just takes off. So my question to you is are you expecting us to go to the Army Corps, or are you guys going to handle this?
No, we are. Yeah, because that's why the Army Corps is not. I think what I was initially wanting to say is, look, if that the city would kind of take I don't want to say the responsibility. It's always going to be our responsibility, but that would have been something that would have fallen on the city side of the ledger as not being able to deliver. And the mayor said no, wasn't going to take on that because it doesn't control the Army. And I think it may have just been the Conservancy District, not the Army Corps. We always knew was our responsibility. So that's why this is very limited to city agencies and entities, that the city is just kind of saying, yeah, we'll take the responsibility to get these approvals.
Okay. What's the Lawrenceburg Economic Development Commission?
Bruce, you want to explain that?
Sorry,
The Lawrenceburg Economic Development Commission. The reason for that?
Yeah, the Economic Development Commission is and I understand you do have one? Or
we do, yeah. We actually already have one, believe it or not.
Okay.
Well, we got to put people on it, but we got one. Yeah, they've been meeting in the basement all these years.
Okay.
Tom Snyder's on it, I think.
Tom, you on that?
He is now. He's got his hand up.
Yeah, the Economic Development Commission operates under a separate statute from the Redevelopment Commission, and historically what Economic Development Commissions have usually done is made recommendations. They have a public hearing and they make a recommendation to City Council when they're going to be financing projects for the private sector. Sometimes it's through the issuance of bonds, conduit bonds, like we talked about possibly doing here. Sometimes it's just through, if you have the funds on hand, like you do, it's financing the project through that. But it's Indiana Code 36-7-12, and it always deals with the city participating with private sector entities for development projects like you're doing here.
So it's a requirement?
Yeah. Yeah, so they would just have one meeting, one hearing, make a recommendation to the council, and we get to the actual forgivable loan agreement and that sort of thing.
And then, Paul, I wanted to go, or for everyone really, but I wanted to go back to what we were talking about with the pre-development costs. So it's important to know that split where we say, okay, if the project fails for any of these entities that we're taking responsibility for, like planning, zoning, historic, redevelopment, then we're responsible for 100% of those costs. If it fails pre-development for Flaherty and Collins reasons, then they're responsible. And then if it's Army Corps LCD or an act of God, then we split it. That's only for pre-development costs. Those are capped at $100,000. and that is just this first phase of pre-development engineering and planning that is going to last. We've anticipated in the contract until April. So I did want to let you know this isn't just a indefinite responsibility.
No,
I think
it's got a cap on it.
Well, and also it's not in addition to the 15. Like if you spend the 100,000, that means the 15 million is not happening. That we're all going home, and so I think that's right. I mean that only happens if things go south. And so the two things is one, if it's not going to be 15 million plus 100,000, and also we're already have spent more than what your max is that you could spend kind of under this arrangement for whatever that's worth.
That's important. Those are pre-development costs that will, and our approvals, all the entities that are in our control, we will have all of those done relatively quickly. All of the, where Bruce talked about convening the Economic Development Commission, having them vote, doing property transfers, planning and zoning, things like that. We'll start on those, and we should get those done relatively quickly. The only long-term kind of ongoing third party that no one has control over is the Army Corps, right? And that's going to be ongoing until the project's done. We're going to have to work with them, which we will. We've already had contact with them. They've let us know preliminarily, here's what we're looking for. We let them talk to Flaherty & Collins engineers, and so they're already kind of starting out. And then, of course, that'll just keep going throughout the whole project.
Hey, Del.
Yes, sir.
We had this economic development situation.
Yes, sir.
In the past 3 years, we've had two situations where that's come up on redevelopment, and you've addressed it the following way. One of them was the old Kroger Plaza. It was questioned whether or not we could do that, and that was in the first month of Kelly's administration, or the second month. And we did it under economic development, and you gave us an opinion that we could do economic development. The second was for the dry cleaners up on the hill a year later, for economic development for them. Mm-hmm. And we put both of those projects under economic development. So we have addressed that issue. If we shouldn't be looking at economic development, you should advise us.
Yeah, exactly. So the economic development is part of redevelopment's purpose.
That was your opinion at the time, I remember.
That's still my opinion. So, but then the Economic Development Commission is just a separate board that we haven't used before. So yeah, both things are true.
We used to try to relate it to the 10-county grant for some reason.
Okay.
I'm not sure why, but that's how I remember it.
And that makes sense. I don't know when we formed, or I don't know how we formed it and when, but
I think it was formed during the 10-county grant.
That would make sense.
Reason for that. Yeah.
Okay, that's good background.
Right, you're right.
When would the taxpayer agreement start with the issuance of the C of O and the occupancy filling up, or is it going to it won't have a delayed date? It's the question I'm asking. Sometimes you make these agreements and they back off.
Yeah.
So are we?
Well, and these two can weigh in on that. What we've looked at. So the two kind of keystones of this agreement, the things that are the best, that stand out, that are the best for us and the best for the city ongoing, is that we have a 25-year agreement that's locked in as recorded with the land, where we have this property tax floor where they have to pay a minimum in property tax, but then if it gets assessed higher, then they have to pay the higher amount. Not only does that run for 25 years, but that runs with the land. As far as when it starts, I think I would ask for you guys, maybe Darren, to see when that traditionally starts. But then also included, Paul, in kind of similar vein, is the 10-year ownership agreement. So one of the reasons that Flaherty & Collins is so attractive for our community is that they're not a passive developer. They don't just build an apartment and say, see you later, good luck with it. They actually stay involved, they staff it, they own it, they maintain it. So obviously their plans are to staff it, own it, maintain it forever. But we do have a promise to protect us and to protect the citizens where it's a promise that's enforceable and recorded with the land.
So the tax payments, the full tax payment, which is $300,000, is a minimum, would typically occur the year after you get your C of O, just because the way taxes work in Indiana, you pay taxes a year late after it's assessed. So that's when, 3 years from now. There would be some taxes paid during construction, but that's at the assessor's kind of, I don't know if whim's the right word, to put a value on the tax rate. There's no minimum payment during construction. It's
now all that being, and if something could be put in there, the only reason why I asked that was because sometimes I hear, well, the taxes don't start for 5 years or 10 years or something on different deals that I've heard.
Yeah, the very first full tax bill that we get,
We can do.
300 guaranteed or more. Because once we finish the project, then it has to get assessed.
there's nothing in here about delayed taxes, so that couldn't happen anyway.
Okay, all right. Under the obligations of the developer, now, and that's on page 5. The one thing that I'm sure all of us abide by is before we sign something, we need to see everything. Well, I'd like to see a rendering attached to know what we're looking at. And if you go down that line, I mean, I know you can't put a schedule together yet, but we should have somewhat of a budget. I need to see certain things before I can sign and vote for certain things. So right now, I think we seen a rendering that stayed away from the levee. I think we seen one that went into it, and now I don't know where we're at. But I don't know how close you are to getting that.
Yeah, so we don't update renderings all that often, quite frankly. I mean, we will anytime you want us to, but those are probably the only 2 that have ever been done. We haven't messed a lot with the exterior of the building because we've been working more on internal stuff and where it goes in the levee, not going to levee. So I'm happy to resend where we're at, and if we need to do a new one, but we just really don't have any new information to adjust it. So if you like what you've seen, it would probably look like that. If you didn't, I'd need to know what you didn't like, what you'd want to have changed so that it could be a meaningful rendering.
Where are we at? Which one are we?
Well, I can tell you as far as the aesthetics of it, the Historical Society has given me their input on that, and that's the last rendering that we showed. I think everybody had seen it.
Yeah.
It was a different colored,
more brick, more
brick,
brown.
Yeah, more different color on the outside.
I mean, do we have plans of taking a rendering to the LCD?
Oh yes, it's going to go with this.
Yes. So
we go over and talk.
So that's
yes.
So that's what I'm hoping I get to see too.
Yes.
Yeah. So
everybody, yes. The rendering has to go with the LCD meeting. Yes, we're going to have it with the LCD meeting.
Well, what about ours? Is how quick? I mean, here's the thing I'm getting at. They want my signature and my vote, but it says to be attached. I'm all right with the schedule, but I'd like to see it. I'm a little bit. I just want to see that rendering. We got a budget. I'd like to see something put before us.
Latest one.
I know you guys are good enough, and you've done it enough to where we can do some things and attach some things.
We can get the rendering pretty quickly, Paul. I think we could print out a paper copy.
I can resend what the most recent one we have. Yeah. But I think you've seen that one. Have it. Like I said, it's just not something that gets updated all that regularly, and especially wouldn't get updated unless there was some feedback like you need to change this to that. Which as developers, we've probably given some of that to the architect, but anything from the city. I would want to have that so that they could make sure they were changing in a way that met your desires.
Okay. Going down through there under codes, I think now I hear your conversation on why you left the Corps of Engineers out, because you don't want to be responsible.
No.
Okay. Now, okay, let's see. Meetings. I mean, I don't need them here every meeting, but I like updates for the public. We got a big project like this going on. I don't want it all happening internally.
Site plan.
I'd like to see something like that with it, and
Okay.
yeah,
Is that the
be
latest?
simple, just something simple.
Aaron, I have a
nothing.
simple question.
And then here's the.
Yes.
Receive,
Okay,
for approval, how quickly would the construction?
and I think everybody, yeah,
Yeah.
Should be around 6
that
months.
way we all,
Six.
okay,
6.
exactly.
Yeah.
So, and then as we go through.
See, I
Well,
don't
to
know.
get take what is a design and get it to where you have construction documents about how to build it. That usually take, and then to get all the permits and get financing in place. That's about 6 months.
I would like to see, once we get going, the schedule to come in and give us updates, that's all.
Obviously, we do want to do the same thing we're doing with the park.
That's right.
And, yes, in fact, I would think that would be beneficial for both sides
Yeah,
anyway.
not a problem at all.
All right, now, this one concerns me quite a bit because I don't think the date's even possible. Page number 5, down to bottom, obligations of Lawrenceburg. We're, Lawrenceburg approvals. Unless you're leaving out the core out of this again.
It is. It's out of there.
Yeah, it's just the simple.
Lawrenceburg approvals is just what we had mentioned, like redevelopment,
Right?
planning and zoning,
Okay.
economic development commission.
That's it. Yeah.
That's it.
And all that is us saying
Yeah.
that if
We know
you,
that
you
Core isn't
can't
gonna-
deliver those, then we got some serious concerns. It's nothing beyond that.
Okay.
So what we're really looking at is about that time for closing. So, because once the closing occurs,
I don't know if we can have closing because
Okay.
the Army Corps, you just don't know that.
okay.
So,
Wait till the Army Corps
Well,
they get
then,
back to us.
here's my next question. If it's something we're not gonna find in it, how are we to deal with the Army Corps of Engineers and have it in this contract to where we are all protected? What do we do? Just not say anything?
Explain that. I don't
Well,
understand that.
we're leaving it out, obviously, because Lawrenceburg doesn't wanna be responsible for it.
We don't want to be responsible for them making the decision that's going to keep us from doing the
there's no
project.
financial penalty to the city of
We
Lawrenceburg if
didn't
the
want
Army
the
Corps
financial.
says we don't approve this. That's what's left out.
Any reason.
So we won't see anything about the Corps of Engineers in this contract anywhere.
No, this is just.
That's why I'm not seeing it.
Right,
because-
this is just the development agreement between the developer and the city. The Army Corps is a piece of the permitting process, but neither one of us have any control over that, so they are not a part of the,
So we're covered in this contract, and I'm asking my lawyers here. If the Army Corps of Engineers just get so hard to deal with that we don't get anywhere and we gotta call this project off, we're covered to where the developers can't come back to us and sue us.
Correct. No,
go ahead.
That's my question. I mean, I was looking for, that's all.
What was your question? I'm sorry.
We're
Talking to him.
what I'm wanting to know is, and I look for it, never seen the Corps of Engineers in here mentioned except once, and it wasn't. I want to feel certain, because it is unpredictable, that if the Corps of Engineers says, or I don't think they're going to say, do not build this building. They won't say that. But at some point, you might end up with, hey, this has become such a financial burden, it's just not going to happen.
that's a real risk.
yeah,
And that's on us.
So
Yeah.
my point is at that point when they make that decision, are we covered in this contract to where we don't have any repercussions from what that happens?
Yeah,
That's all I
100%.
want to know.
In almost all of the stuff we've been talking about so far, all really links back to that. So, what would happen is that there would be based on our ongoing relationship with, thank you, Kelly, based on our ongoing relationship with the Army Corps, if the design needs to be altered or changed in any way, I think you're right, Paul, that their feedback would not be don't build at all. It would just be we'd prefer this or we'd like to see this. And it's really the same with the geotech. As we go through this process, what we care about is, are we capped at our 15 million? Yes, we are. So any changes to the design would have to make sense for Flaherty and Collins, but still be within our 15 million. And then by making sure that we've defined clearly that Army Corps is the same as an act of God, same as if there's, a lightning strikes it. Basically, we're saying that that's not, we can't control them, and neither can Flaherty and Collins, so that's why they're not in the agreement. If for some reason their input makes the project undoable, then that is not something that is Flaherty and Collins' fault or our fault. However, again, these costs that we're responsible for are pre-development costs, and they're capped. So it's not as if we would, have to pay anything as a penalty for that. So all of those things are very important, you're right, and those are the things that really we've spent probably most of the negotiation, Tom, Bruce, and Darren, and Darren's attorney at Ice Miller could speak to, just making sure those are identified and defined clearly so we know kind of what's our responsibility, what's theirs. We've got some copies of the rendering that
Pass these around.
Kelly just brought down.
We can get, that'll be attached with the document. Or we will attach it.
And so what Darren was saying, as far as the rendering goes, it's that initial rendering that, we didn't pass it out today, but it's that same rendering that we've all seen all along. Of course, again, everything kind of loops back to the Army Corps. If during the course of the project, Army Corps' guidance is that, okay, maybe this platform should be shorter or these pillars should be located differently, then we would roll with those punches as much as we could, staying within the overall parameters of the project.
No, I didn't see those down there. Is that it right there?
Yes, sir, exactly.
Okay.
Yep. I think the one thing that Mayor said is a good point. This is a rendering that really reflects structurally what this project will look like. Facade, we're really committed to with our relationship with our historic society to making sure that the facade looks good. It matches downtown, kind of like you guys did with the Civic Park project. That's always important to us. We try to weigh in. I was meeting with Mr. Massmore today. We try to weigh in on all of our developments to make sure they fit with what looks good with the city. Our historic properties are our most valuable asset, so that facade could be tweaked, but that would be
because these
aesthetic.
are different.
Exactly. So the rendering is just to give you an idea of, okay, what's the structure look like. The facade could change, like the color of the exterior or the material of the exterior.
And who decides on the facade changes?
Well, the Historical Society has some say in that.
Really, you guys.
But you guys,
and it'll
come back to you guys.
Yeah, and what we'd like to do is really have you guys decide, everyone here, plus Historic Society, kind of ride shotgun and weigh in too, because I think that would be helpful to our decision making.
I only have two more.
Good. Ask all you want.
In the page 11I, it lists that the property is not subject to any easements, covenants, or conditions. And I guess is the only thing I'm concerned with, and I know have we had a title search on it yet? Because I know we have an easement on it for the levee, but that's probably
we've had title search done, and it didn't. I think there was some right of way, or that the Army Corps has a maintenance easement.
Okay, you're right.
But nothing that I guess we felt concerned about or that would prevent the project from happening.
That's fine. And let's see. Oh, the only one of the questions I'd have has been the structure of payment, will that be something that we can see? In other words, I know you guys have talked about it, but I didn't really see it in here.
Well, and what happens, the 15 million we put in an escrow account, okay? We'd like to, and we've introduced, at the request of Savista Bank, introduced them to Flaherty and Collins's financial folks, because what would be ideal to the city, I think, is if we could get have the place here that where we put the escrow of our money, but we would also like, it would be nice if it works out that a local bank would have the opportunity to finance Flaherty and Collins' piece of it. That way we know it's all the money was here locally.
Committed to talking to them first.
Yes.
It takes a pretty good sized bank. I mean, we're going to need a $15 million loan. It takes a pretty good sized bank. So, but we at least want to give them first shot, see if any of them are able to do that. And then the escrow funds will have to be with whomever that construction lender is, just with the way they wouldn't allow it to the construction lender. We couldn't get our $15 million loan if that $15 million was elsewhere. Yeah.
All right. That answer that? Yep. Anyone else up here? Any redevelopment folks have a question?
Yeah, I just want to add that I just want to remind everybody, in our opinion, this is a game changer for the town. I know you brought it up a few minutes ago, but we're still behind it as far as I'm concerned. I feel very comfortable with Darren where he said tonight in Paul's questions. I think that answered. I'm just in support of it still, as a citizen too.
Okay, so was there any changes that you need made on the document itself? Except for you want to, we'll attach the renderings to the document.
Yeah, because this one I have here is not even the same structure as this one.
And I can't say that I think the structure's not.
Yeah, because see, this one has this roof up here on top. This one.
Well,
yeah.
Yeah, there's two.
Let Darren take a look.
There's two different ones.
Well, this one that I have.
Talking about
Yeah,
developing
you want that
the penthouse up there.
maximum taken out, the 130 to 150? We can do that.
That one.
Well, I mean, you heard him say, and then I guess I'm counting on my lawyer to make sure that from time to time.
Unless those are the same building, just different.
No, I understand.
Those might be the same building,
But-
just different shaded.
Different
But I
shades.
really,
Yeah.
if we have to do something for the historical
Okay.
society, but I don't want to get
And then
into
this is
this, us changing a whole bunch of stuff in their building.
Oh, no.
And then there's a site plan there.
The outside of it, because I was pretty impressed with what I seen.
Well, we had
I
the
agree.
sketch that you all gave out in your proposal, your
Yeah, I mean, it's going to look
initial
similar to that.
presentation. Yeah.
As far as the size, the only one is the exterior material.
Yeah.
So again, we're still working through that ourselves. So anything we have now is probably not even.
Well, the exterior, colors are colors.
The one thing,
As long as it isn't purple.
the one thing that was brought up earlier was maybe taking out from Exhibit B the project parameters, taking out the 150 units, not less than 130 units, taking that out of it. Is everybody okay if we take that out of the agreement? You okay if we take it out of the agreement?
Make sure it doesn't then fall back to another specific number again. If you're making me put something in blood today, then I'm putting 130 to 150 some.
Right.
But if you just want to get rid of kind of that,
Well, I'm all right with you not getting it in blood as long as you ain't gonna hold me to the 15 million. I don't want that in blood either.
well, then,
Well, I'm asking a fair
Oh,
question.
you mean if they don't build 140
Well,
some odd?
we're
I
building
feel like I'm asking a fair question because when I voted on this,
Yeah.
I voted for 150 units and $15 million.
and right now we're at 152 units.
Okay.
But I don't know when I get into-
I'm good with that. He just said it.
But what if I get to the core and they say you have to be X amount of feet off the levee, which then cuts in to the building? I mean, think about it, if you just cut back, 20 feet, you get at least 2 units on each side times 4. There's 8, and on both sides there's 16. I mean, if they were to do something like that, then my 152 is 136 without any other changes.
Here's the other thing I'm going to say, and me and you had this conversation months and months ago, and I told you, stay away from the levee. You remember that?
Right.
I told you that before we ever started.
And they are.
And they are. And you did. But now it seems like to me that you months ago, I was made a promise that I'd get 150 units by staying away from the levee. I have never encouraged you. As a matter of fact, I warned you. It's a bad site.
I didn't know that.
Oh, yes, you did, because I told you it was a bad site. There ain't anybody in this town right here, and you can ask Mike over there. We all know that that site's not a good site.
Okay.
That had industry on it, and it probably had industry on top of old industry on it. So it was a bad site, and you had a levee, and I advise you stay away from the levee, because what it's going to do is it's going to slow the project down, and it's going to throw numbers on it.
But you got to understand this piece. And I agree with what you just said. But whether it's 150 units or 140, say it's 146 units, you may have more 2-bedroom than 1-bedroom.
Yeah, I can commit to
That's going to
150
get you additional
studios
people.
right now.
And
You were talking about people.
And I'm okay with that. What you said there, I'm all right with. But I just want it. Right now, I feel like I'm being asked to sign something that I have absolutely. Once I sign this, it could go anywhere it wants to go.
No,
I want you understanding that I have some expectations here. $15 million was a whole lot to get me to take and vote yes for, and I talked to a lot of people, but the thing they also told me was this development agreement is very important to that what we're doing here. So I need the people walking downtown.
Yep.
2 bedrooms will do it. I love you guys. You had a great building up there. But I got to make a good deal here. Well, we've never made a deal like that. And in the past, I just want to make sure this administration makes another good deal.
And you know, I stand behind this deal, and I'll tell you why. Personally, I don't care if it's 140 or 150, because I know I'm guaranteed to $300,000 in property taxes at a minimum, and I mean and I'm getting a minimum or approximately 125,000 square foot.
Yeah, I mean, the buildings. That's why I think we're getting off track and thinking that
footprint is not
there's any discretion on there's no discretion on our part here. We're building everything that can be built there on the site. It's just trying to figure out what it's like. If you have a pizza, right? Does it end up getting cut into 8 pieces or 16 or the pizza is the same size. That's all I'm saying. There's no trying to scale back this building at all. It's when the architects dropped something on there. They said this should be about 150. I hope I never came across and said it will never drop below 150. I'm saying it's approximately 150 based on this. Once they get in and start putting stairwells and columns, we get Army feedback core, and you got to fit some parking underneath the building. And here, that can send it a couple units in any direction. So that's why I said right now it's actually falling on 152. But as the design evolves, we get Army Corps feedback. I don't expect it to change significantly, but that was just some protection there, because if it ends up having to be 128 units, 135 units, do we need to come back and go through this whole process again? Again, there's no walking back what we committed to. We'll squeeze as much as we can on that site. The market may change to where there's more empty nesters who want to live there, and we find that there's more demand for 2 bedrooms than 1 bedrooms. Well, 2 bedrooms are bigger. A 2-bedroom unit and a 1-bedroom unit are both a unit, but one's bigger and takes up more space and has more people living in it than what a 1-bedroom. So that was the only thing trying to be accomplished, again, with 130 to 150. The building would not change at all.
The other thing to look at, Paul, I think, and I'm not disagreeing with. I think it was always said approximately 150. So that could have been 155, could have been 145, whatever. But what I feel good about on the agreement is the financial piece doesn't change no matter how many units. really, the onus is on them to get as many units as they can, because at the end of the day, their income is gonna be less if it's less than, because the gap, correct me if I'm wrong, but the gap, remember we talked about the gap? If the gap would have been significantly higher at 130 units than it was when you figured it at 150.
Yeah, from a per unit cost, from an efficiency standpoint, because your point about the taxes, right? If we do 130 units, that's 300,000 over 130 units versus 150. So my per unit tax payment, just like my per unit,
that's on them.
Janitor, my per unit leasing, it's all higher. So we generally like to be at 200. This site can't fit 200. So we're already inefficient at 150. It's just not inefficient. Less than optimal efficiency at 150. We don't want to do less than 150. I'm just saying when everything gets settled, if it is a little bit less, I didn't want to have to come back and we got to start this whole approval process all over, in which case we're at risk of being out at that point probably $1 million. And the council saying, no, we're not going to do it. I'm like, well, I can't fit 150. I'm like, no, we're not doing it. And then that's all that was trying to accomplish. What we should have done was probably had something more than 150 as well. And I think if we come in at over 150, we're not in violation of the agreement. But it probably would have read better if it was, between 130 and 160 or 170, something like that. That would have been the intent of what we're trying to accomplish.
Hey, Bruce and Darren, real quick before we wrap up, could you guys talk about post-development costs? So we talked about pre-development costs and how those are capped. So just in the event that post-development there is an act of God or Army Corps does something unforeseeable or unforeseen that makes the project not workable, how would those costs be shared? If you guys could both kind of talk about that a little bit. Because pre-development is capped at 100,000.
I don't think there is. I mean, Bruce can weigh in. If I understand what you're saying, once we start construction, you have a completion guarantee from an entity that has teeth. So we'll have to finish. We'll have insurance to the extent needed to cover a lot of that. So I don't, at least post-closing, once we close and we're going, there's no additional risk to the city on any of that.
I guess, and I was texting Bruce a little bit, I guess what I thought would be, we get a year down the road and all of a sudden Army Corps does something that makes the project stop, that hopefully never occurs, but then would there be any danger for us?
Right. So the 100,000 is all tied to the city getting the approvals that we said we would get, on the financing, on the transfer piece, et cetera. So if that doesn't happen by the end of April, then we would be responsible for up to $100,000 of pre-development costs, because that was sort of on us, right? If we get beyond that, and then there's acts of God, which would include the Army Corps, then we've agreed to just split whatever costs have been incurred up to that point. The 100,000 doesn't relate to that part, but both sides obviously have an incentive not to go too crazy on costs until we know for sure the project can go forward. Does that make sense?
Yeah.
And Darren, I don't think you guys will be the type to move forward with the project until you're comfortable that you're going to be able to please and meet the Corps' demands or wants.
Right. I mean, we could have had a final rendering, a final project design here, and incurred a lot of money, but that would have been a bit reckless on our part. So we are a little bit cautious in that regard of trying not to spend too much money. You got to spend some. Like I said, we're already 100,000 or more, beyond that. So, but we are trying to be judicious in what we spend, not only enough to keep it moving. We didn't want to just stand still, keep it moving somewhat, but not too quickly. We had to get over this hurdle so that we could start taking it to the LCD and then the Army Corps. But we're not going to be spending a lot more money except trying to figure out how to fix that soil issue at this point.
Thank you.
You guys got any questions down there?
Nope.
So I'm gonna say this once again. Then, if you want, or we can keep the approximately 150 units in here. If you want to take that other thing out. Not less than 130, but I think it's up to you guys. But,
Well, I'll make a motion, and Dale can tell me whether we can make it happen with the explanations from our lawyer, with the promise to attach the attachments.
Yep.
I would move forward.
Okay. Yep.
I mean, I don't want to hold. I know these guys. I know there's a lot to do. I know they're working on it. I have good conversations. I like them. I'm all in. I'm just trying to protect what I want to know. I just have questions.
Yeah, and I feel comfortable that, given the explanations and the commitments we've heard today, those are all reflected in the agreement. And so everything that you've asked for tonight has been answered in the affirmative, and it is in the agreement. I mean, that's how I would view it. Bruce Donaldson's from Barnes, he can weigh into on our side, but I would answer your question, yes, I think we absolutely can. Bruce, what do you think?
okay. All right, I got a motion on the floor to accept the development agreement.
Second.
Second. All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nay.
Roll call, please.
Councilperson Tony Abbott.
Nay, and I just want to explain my reasoning is I'm all in favor of the project, but I've never been in favor of the way we're financing. I don't believe in giving away $15 million. I think we could have bonded it, tiffed it out. So that's why I'm voting nay.
Well, and I'm glad you said that. I'm glad you weighed in. I mean, I respect your view of that, and I think both of those were good options. What I can tell you and what we'll see, we've got some data, but we'll share it once it's kind of finalized. But our accounting folks have given really strong data about how this money is going to come back to us a lot more quickly than even we thought it would. So I totally respect your opinion, and it is good. I mean, both those options were good options, but I think what we'll find is that this project is going to pay for itself on its face, but then the extrinsic benefits are just kind of too numerous to even count. I mean, what it's going to do for our city.
There will be money coming back from the project, I realize that,
Yeah.
but as far as I know, unless it's changed, that money has to stay in the TIF area. It wouldn't include the whole city. Unless we TIF every part of the city we want to use that money in.
Anything that benefits the TIF. So,
Let me explain.
yeah, go ahead, Mayor. Sorry.
And TIF money doesn't have to be used just in a TIF district. TIF money can be used to do anything, for any purpose to improve the area surrounding a TIF district as well.
Okay.
So it doesn't have to be used just directly in the TIF district. So the answer really is it can be used for other items.
Can it be used to move the jail?
Move the tail.
Anyway,
Yes.
Can we go on with the roll call, please?
Councilperson Aaron Cook.
Yes.
Councilperson Mel Davis.
Yes.
Councilperson Randy Abner.
Yes.
Councilperson Paul Seymour Jr.
Yes.
All right, motion passes 4-1. Thank you. All right, that's the end of our work session. I entertain a motion to adjourn.
Moved.
Second.
Second.
All those in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Motion carries. Thank you.
I'm already comfy now.
Yes, just that one, but just Mayor. Okay. We'll have to see which one. Okay. Well, let's do that one too. You sign, then I'll change up the signature page.
This is one I have.
Why don't you sign that in January?
Nice book you got there.
Okay, we'll talk to Bruce about it.
I'll take care of that on the way.
But I'll send that to you.
No, it'll just be, I'll sign it.
I'll run leopard.
I'll call, but I think should be.
Take this chair, sit on the level.